Hello there, folks. Welcome to the Inside Line F1 podcast. Welcome to Pits To Podium. This is the Brazilian GP preview episode. And actually, this year, it's called the Sao Paulo GP. That's one thing to watch out for. What are the other 5 things to watch out for? We'll tell you more on that in this very episode. So stick right here. More on this in a bit. Hey folks, welcome back into the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits to Podium. My name is Soumil Arora, and you might know me from the Driving Force on Disney Plus Hotstar, or maybe from Glance Live or Glance TV now as well. Yeah, I can flex about that a little bit. But I'm joined by Kunal Shah, the former marketing head of the Force India F1 team, who now works as a motorsport consultant at the VS Sport Network in Norway. You know this part, right? This is all the common intro. This is all the good stuff that we always tell you. But there's more good stuff coming because we're back at Sao Paulo 2 years after we came back here. Honestly, feels like a long time, but if there's a place to come to, Kunal, for a really good championship closing race, this is it. It literally can't get better.
It can't get better, and thank you. It can never get better with the openings that you do as well to the episodes time and again, Somil. So thank you very much for that. And you mentioned it. It's not the Brazilian Grand Prix. It's not the traditional name that we've been calling it for, I think, 48 years. For some strange reason, I'm pretty sure it's down to some sponsor or the Brazilian government or the local organizers, whoever's funding it, said we need to call it the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, right? So I don't care what they call it, as long as we keep racing at Interlagos and the Rio de Janeiro or any of the other circuits that are being discussed for Brazil don't really come up, because the Interlagos just is what it is, Interlagos. And also, interestingly, Interlagos is not the official name of the circuit, right? It's
Correct.
the Autodromo Jose Carlos Pace or Pace. I
Pache,
wouldn't know
yeah.
what the
Pache,
local
yeah.
pronunciation is. Yeah, and I think Pace, just the word English, is fantastic. It's a high-speed circuit, and it's got Pace and in the official name, right? And you mentioned championship and championship conclusions, etc. And all of the four current world champions, not current, but all of the four world champions who are racing on the 2021 Formula One grid have had a world championship confirmed at this Grand Prix, right? And then, of course, there's Felipe Massa, who we'll always
Huh.
remember each time we come here. And it's the middle of a triple header, Sommel. Freight is delayed, as we know, but I know the freight's going to come. I know there's eventually going to be a race. There will be some things that they will change, I guess, if things are not on time. But what I'm really looking forward to, and there will be one branding change that Formula One is doing this weekend, but here's something else that we should try and look forward to. So the 2 races ago was the race in Austin, 400,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Then last weekend was the race in Mexico, 372,000
Yeah.
people, right? That's a three-quarter of a million fans over a fortnight. And Brazil is one of the more traditional Formula One markets, right? Austin, you can say, is fairly new. Mexico is there or not there, depending on if there's a Mexican driver on the grid, like we've got the Rodriguez brothers when they were there, or Checo Perez. But
Yeah.
Brazil has been there forever since Ayrton Senna and several other drivers who sort of make the legend of Formula One in Brazil. So could it be that Formula One would have engaged close to a million fans on the ground in the stands over the course of these 3 weekends, Samuel? And that's one storyline I'm really looking forward to.
That's ridiculous. That's so many people. And I'm sure you're not going to see that number increase by a lot in Qatar, that's for sure. Because when MotoGP comes across there, the stands, well, what can I say? There's a reason why they have so few stands at that very circuit. So take of that what you will. But Sao Paulo, all things considered, Kunal, you're right. It's always a fiesta. And I know for a fact that Brazil isn't always a fiesta. My director at my esports company, he lives in Brazil. He tells that the image of what we see from the outside is not all party, not all fun, not all flavor. But at the race weekend, Kunal, it always is. And what a better story to come to for the race weekend than the fact that there's again this big question roaming around about Well, is it going to be Red Bull or Mercedes who hold the upper hand here? Because, of course, in the last few weekends, interestingly enough, we've seen this very fun dynamic play out where either one of the teams has the top trumps, the top hand, the upper hand, whatever you'd like to call it, in terms of raw pace. And the other team has to do something really special. So, say in Mexico, it was Mercedes who were trying out something different all the time, but Lewis just didn't have the raw pace. Similar in USA. In Turkey, it was Red Bull on the other way around. So, this is something very intriguing, Kunal. And Interlagos, Red Bull have been fast there historically there too. So, again, same old, but really good same old, right? Uncertainty.
Yes, uncertainty. And, you mentioned Red Bull, Mercedes, and then a name, cropped up in my mind. And this is a little off Formula One, but it's very important for Soumil and me on the podcast, right? So shout out to Naman Jain for sort of helping us increase our audio capabilities. If we are sounding sharper than we ever did, it's thanks to Naman and his talent and his inputs. Then,
Oh, yeah.
frankly, why did his name come up when we spoke about Mercedes and Red Bull? Because, Soumil and I have had the same setup. It's Naman who's helped us tweak the setup in a way that it works for us to give us really world class, studio like audio, right? And it's like, Mercedes had the same suspension. They just tweaked their setup so that the suspension lowers in the highs, in the straight lines to give them better performance. So it's something similar to that, Soumil, right? And so thank you very much, Naman, for, helping us out. And now back to Formula One. Red Bull is traditionally supposed to be quicker, higher altitude, like we saw in Mexico. This is about 800 meters above sea level. We've seen Max do well already before our chair till Esteban Ocon sort of did his thing once as well. But overall, I think it's just being in Brazil is going to be fantastic because it's a long race. It's a short lap. It's about 70 odd laps that we're going to see. We've seen several late race safety cars that have come up, which have sort of changed the course of races, like we've seen before. And a stat that was shared by the Alpine F1 team is that 14 races in Brazil have been won by less than 5 seconds, including 2 of the last 3 races that were held here. So whether it is Red Bull, whether it is Mercedes, whosoever is going to eventually, win, I think we're going to be in for a closer race this weekend. At least that's what we all should be hoping for, because, Max is 19 points ahead. Lewis has just said every race is a must win for him. There's a sprint this weekend, so there are more points up for grabs.
That's right.
If Max suddenly pulls, more than a 25 points gap by the time they leave Brazil, then going into the last 3 races, he's going to have a gap of more than 1 race win. So he's suddenly in that space where he could afford a DNF, whether it's mechanical, whether it is sporting, whether somebody bumps him off. So it is tilting towards Max's territory.
Yep.
And this is where I hope that it remains close, where Lewis is able to pull something back, so we have a battle all the way up until Abu Dhabi.
It's interesting you mentioned this. DNFs could really be the case that changes things up. And you mentioned about Ocon and Verstappen, about all that could happen. Really, you can't tell. And honestly, that's something that's been happening in the cricket over the last few days, where there's been unlikely heroes and situations where you really didn't even imagine that something like that could even happen, and someone who's actually losing badly can pull it up so well towards the end. And that could maybe happen eventually, right? If you're a Lewis Hamilton fan, that's what you really want to hear. Not so much if you're a Max Verstappen fan, to be very honest with you. But you pointed out something very interesting, Kunal, that sort of gives away the excitement behind it. F1 sprint. It's around, 9 odd minutes to the episode, and then we're like, yeah, there's F1 sprint as well. That's also a thing happening so far this weekend. Clearly, of course, it's not hit the highs that we wanted it to, but it adds another variable. And honestly, that's all that Formula One needs right now. More control variables. And the sprint is coming up. There is an air of uncertainty around Lewis Hamilton potentially getting an engine penalty. Again, nothing's confirmed. Hamilton himself is waiting for some more news from Mercedes to get an idea on that. it just adds up. It really just adds up. And with the sprint, interestingly enough, two past races, as Sundaram has often pointed out, and he's going to have a segment on this episode, by the way, as well. So that's fun to hear. But as Sundaram has often pointed out, Kunal, two sprint races, two accidents between Verstappen and Hamilton on that very weekend. I get a feeling this is just going to be another climax for the season, if anything.
The best way to put it is what you and I actually said last weekend after Mexico. You know, two race starts, two opening laps. You never know what's going to happen, especially if it's Max and Lewis on the front two rows, which is pretty much possible. It is going to be like that. It's something that's going to be extremely exciting to look forward to. And another variable, you mentioned a variable, another variable here is that the number two drivers are actually coming to the fore as well. They're coming to the fight. We've seen Checo Perez, brilliant run of form. He was pressurizing Lewis Hamilton in Mexico. Valtteri Bottas, he took pole position in Mexico till before he was spun out and so on. So I think, yes, that's going to be another very interesting variable to see this weekend as well, Soumil.
And with that, let's actually do something special, right? Why don't we give you a few more stats? So after weeks, and thank goodness things are finally okay on that end, Sundaram is back with the stats preview, and we shall show you exactly what he's got on board right here, right now. Listen in.
Last four races of the season, and everyone is going to be looking at the numbers. The points table in the Drivers' and the Constructors' Championship, who is increasing the points gap or who is reducing the points gap, and eventually who's going to be winning the championship. Everyone's going to be having their eyes on the numbers. So we like talking about numbers. So let's do the stats preview of the Sao Paulo Grand Prix in Brazil. First up, the Interlagos circuit is the second highest circuit in Formula One in terms of altitude. It's roughly around 800 meters above sea level, only second to Mexico. Now, there was a lot of talk and chatter about how altitude affects the performance of a car over the race weekend. Now, you would see a little bit of that effect this weekend as well, but there is a little bit of thin air. There's going to be a little less drag, but not to the extent of how it was in Mexico. So you'd probably see teams running slightly higher downforce levels in Brazil, especially for that very twisty infield section in the second sector. Now, Interlagos is also the fourth shortest circuit on the F1 calendar after Monaco, Zandvoort, and Mexico. And there's a very short sprint from pole position up until the first corner, which is roughly around 195 meters. Also, the shortest dash probably in all of Formula One. Now, we remember speaking about pole sitters in Mexico and the sort of curse they have, and they have not been winning races or even standing on the podium since 2017. It's pretty much the opposite in Brazil because pole sitters have won 6 of the last 7 races here, and if you're a front row qualifier, you still have a very good benefit because since 2008, every race has been won from the front row. You'd probably think that okay, if pole sitters and front row qualifiers are winning the race, there's probably not a lot of chance of overtaking. Well, you're wrong. Brazil has probably one of the highest overtaking rates in since 2017, only behind Portimao and Hockenheim. So there's going to be a lot of overtaking, a lot of interesting battles that we're going to see on the race weekend. So keep an eye out for that. One of the milestones this weekend is that Daniel Ricciardo is going to surpass Nico Rosberg for the second most consecutive race starts in Formula One. He's going to be doing his 207th race start on Sunday, and he's only behind Lewis Hamilton, who is right up there, up top, with 265 consecutive races, which ended after the Bahrain Grand Prix last year. He could probably, overhaul Lewis Hamilton's record somewhere in 2024, considering we have over 20 races each season, but it's still a very, very big milestone for the Aussie. And lastly, and probably the biggest fact or the biggest stat that I wanted to give in this video is that, first of all, if you're a Mercedes fan, I would probably request you to skip a minute late and watch the rest of the video because you're not going to like this, especially if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan. Interlagos is not Lewis Hamilton's greatest circuit. In 13 appearances, he's been on the podium only 5 times, and that's a big thing, because if you go by Lewis Hamilton's potential, going by his caliber and his dominance in the hybrid era, especially, he's been on the podium only 5 times, and he's won 2 races, and he takes an average of just 10 points in each Brazilian Grand Prix. 10 points is roughly fourth place, and that's one of his worst points averages amongst all the circuits that he's raced at. So can you try and fix that record or better that record in this weekend? We can only get to know that on Sunday, and let's see how the race unfolds and how the championship unfolds. So that was a stats preview of the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, and I'll hopefully catch you for the next one in Qatar.
Well. I just went on a really big talk about how it's so great to have Sundaram back on, and how Interlagos is one of the circuits where overtaking is really possible in the modern day Formula One car. And I forgot that my mic was muted. At least this time it's on, so that's a positive. But the interesting part is, Kunal, as Sundaram mentioned, and I wish I could show this on the video as well, that Interlagos right up there with Portimao, right up there with Hockenheim, in terms of best circuits to have an overtaking race on with these modern day cars. And what this seriously means is that in the midfield, maybe we can have more fights with the likes of Gasly, with the likes of Ferrari, McLaren, because here they can fight. And Kunal has just done what I've just done. That's the point.
It's like the magic button. Lewis Hamilton didn't know if he put it on or off
Seriously.
in Baku, and then we still don't know if it was on or off. But yes, overtaking is going to be fun, especially in the midfield. You mentioned Gasly, and to me, he's the driver to really watch out for. He's returning to the place where he scored his maiden Formula One podium. I loved the scene of his, Toro Rosso car, Honda powered back then, out dragging Hamilton's Mercedes, from the last corner till the finish line, as we know. And Gasly was untouchable in Mexico by Ferrari as well as the McLaren drivers. And Gasly is, it's not, I wouldn't say it's Alpha Tauri versus Alpine in the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah.
It's more like Gasly versus Alpine in the Constructors' Championship. Sorry, Yuki, no offense, but on a more serious note, if you look at the numbers, Gasly scored 86 out of Alpha Tauri's 106 points, and then he's also scored 5 top 6 finishes in the last 8 races, and only Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton have had more, in the same number of races. So that's how phenomenal his performance has been in terms of quality, in terms of consistency, in terms of points. And I think it's going to be fun to see what Gasly is able to do out there as well. So in my view, it's going to be Ferrari versus McLaren, and that's always a battle to look forward to, versus Pierre Gasly, Soumil.
And one interesting element to that Ferrari versus McLaren battle, Kunal, has to be the fact that Ferrari now lead. I suppose it's the first time this year that it's happened in this battle that Ferrari have the upper hand, especially when you consider the timing, right? Only not even a few months ago, only a month and a half ago, McLaren were right up there at their very peak. We were talking about them being genuine competitors everywhere. Now Ferrari have their advantage. How do you see that dynamic flowing away into this place where, honestly, we've seen a lot more titanic Ferrari versus McLaren battles?
I still think it's not over even on the P3 front yet, just like it's not over in the P1 front in the Drivers' Championship, right? Mexico was probably an outlier when it came to McLaren, not doing well and Ferrari doing exceptionally well. I expect the gap to sort of become closer come Interlagos. And eager to see what Daniel Ricciardo is able to pull in as well, because he's having a lot. He's sort of narrowing within a band of good bad races, and I think it's only a matter of time till he sort of gets into that position. I'm sure turn 1 in Mexico, what he did, what actually happened is not Daniel Ricciardo stuff as we know it. So I think even the Ferrari versus McLaren and the Alpine versus Alpha Tauri, it's exciting battles that literally every race could help changing the course of Sommel.
Absolutely, there is that. There, of course, is the aspect that we could maybe see George Russell in his last few races for Williams. So that is another thing to watch out for. And absolutely, Kunal, Yuki Tsunoda, you mentioned he's been the one normally not scoring the points for AlphaTauri, but maybe there are a few inklings that things could get better, especially after last week. He would want to go out there and prove himself, but I just read an article somewhere that said that Alpine of all teams are slightly worried that Tsunoda might get up delivering and his run of form has been good. We'll wait and see about that. But your take on the predictions, Kunal. Who are you going to go with? I know, and I love this fact that things have become so simple, where we just have to rock up and say, "Well, we don't know," and honestly, we don't know. So, who would you put your money on for this weekend?
I will put my money on Max Verstappen this weekend,
Uh
and
huh.
I'm actually waiting to see a weekend, and maybe it's Brazil, and I'm going to literally repeat this till such time it happens, if it happens in 2021. So McLaren are the only team to have scored a 1-2 in 2021. It happened in
Correct.
Monza. Can Checo Perez use his form, use the pace advantage that we all think Red Bull has over Mercedes to sneak in onto the podium higher than P3? I think his best has been P3 all through the season. Of course, he won a
He won,
race. He
yeah, yeah.
won the race in Baku as well. But can Checo Perez finish ahead of Lewis Hamilton and help Max Verstappen get those additional XYZ points, whatever it comes up to be in the Drivers'
Oh.
Championship battle? Of course, it's not great for Formula One, but I think it'll be great to see if Checo is able to, sort of do that. Because in Mexico, Lewis actually turned around and said, I had a car that should have actually finished third and I finished
Yeah.
second, and I'm pretty pleased with that. So I'd love to see if that sort of reverses, just because to me, it seems like the natural course of action, with number two drivers, with Red Bull sort of having the edge as we think, on a Thursday that they do. So
Hmm.
that's my prediction, Somil. And I'm eager to know what yours is.
I think it's going to be 3 consecutive weeks where both you and I, Kunal, have to go for Red Bull. And yeah, I know you're supposed to have a diversity in opinions on a podcast like this, but with their run of form, how can you predict something else, right? I think this is going to be Red Bull territory, and not sure about Sergio, but I do get a feeling it's going to be really close. So that's yeah. I hope that helps. No,
Yes.
I get a feeling that it's going to be Max. I get a feeling it's going to be Sergio. Then maybe Lewis. I don't think he's going to have the best of weekends. If there's an ICE penalty coming in, happy birthday, sir. The things have gone even worse for you, even more pear shaped, if anything. But this is going to be what we think of this weekend, folks. And let us know what your thoughts are on social media. As Kunal mentioned, go check out Naman's work, link in the bio or description or show notes. Again, we're doing this multi-format, right? And also to Sundaram's work, because he's put in an excellent shift to bring out the stats preview for this episode. But folks, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for
But
watching.
before
Ah,
you switch the engine off, Somil,
right.
one actual point, right?
Oh,
One point.
the most efficient engine in the world of?
Yes, Formula One powered by hybrid. That's going to be the new branding that we're going to
Yeah.
see, which finally happens. But another thing as well,
Okay.
uh, this is the last sprint race weekend
That's right.
of the
Yes.
season, which means that a driver could actually score 29 points. That's if you start on no, well, if you win the sprint, you get
Yeah.
3 points. You win the Grand Prix, you get 25 points, and you
Mm.
get the fastest lap of the race in the Grand Prix as well. And that totals up to 29 points. Up until now, no
Uh-huh.
driver has scored 29 points. And I think Daniel Ricciardo has scored the highest in a Grand Prix weekend, which was 27
Six.
points, right?
27. Yes.
So, yeah, so I'd love to see
No.
if, well,
No. Wouldn't that be Lewis Hamilton with 50 at Abu Dhabi 2014?
no, yeah, of course. I meant this season.
Ah,
I
okay,
meant this
okay.
season.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, with all the silly double points that we've had in back in time. But I'd love to see if whether it's Max or Checo
Yeah.
or whoever it is on the top step of the podium, could be Lewis as well. If there's somebody who actually scores that
Oh, that's a
magic
good
number of
point.
29 points, Soumil.
That's a good point. I wonder if it'll happen. I hope it's the last time we see 29 points on offer for a race win. Seriously, I'm not a big fan of sprint, but let's see what we get. Right? I mean, you could end up just quoting Forrest Gump and say an F1 sprint is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. If it leads to another fun Hamilton versus Verstappen clash, I don't mind seeing F1 sprint more often, but that's all that we've got for you this time out, folks. See you for the race review right here on the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits to Podium. And don't forget to enjoy this race weekend. We often end up not doing so because we're so involved in the fight, but enjoy. It's going to be Brazil. It's going to be fun. See you on Monday. Bye-bye.